Please sing along with us. I want to hear all of your voices. Your turn now, everyone.
After that, I think the introduction's been done. I can go home now. So, over the past year and a bit, Emmanuel Synagogue and Netzer in Sydney have embarked upon a journey of community building and participatory prayer in creating the Kol Nefesh Minyan. Kol Nefesh embodies an approach to prayer that has been brilliantly articulated by US musician and creative prayer leader Joey Weisenberg. In his book, How to Build Singing Communities, Joey has presented his unique and compelling approach to participatory singing communities. Variations of this approach to prayer have been successfully unfolding across the Jewish world at Nava Tehillah in Jerusalem, The Kitchen in San Francisco, Ikar in Los Angeles, Romamu in New York City, and of course, more locally, Kilat Kolenu and Sprout in Melbourne, and Ayelet HaShachar in Sydney. It's creating an intergenerational and inclusive singing community in a synagogue space requires much more attention to detail. It requires uplifting melodies, how the space is arranged, democratic prayer leading, and bringing people closer together, davening in concentric circles, and all of this contributes to the ruach of the service. Both Rabbi Cantor Mordechai and Sydney Maskir Avishai Konya will be entertaining us and enlightening us this afternoon. Do I really need to introduce them? Okay. Sorry, they said I don't have to introduce you. Enjoy and take it all in.
I was having fun making the transition, so I hope you enjoy them. So, over the last year and a half, as Sam has just explained, Netzer Sydney and Emmanuel Synagogue have really gone and built this incredible collaboration together. And we've established what we've now named Kol Nefesh, the voice of the soul, as a minyan which currently gets about 70 to 100 people every month. We sit in concentric circles, we bring in leaders. Our youngest one, I think, has been 8, and our oldest, over 70. And all of us and all ages in between coming together. And it's really been a beautiful attempt of creating something more, creating something intergenerational, and creating something meaningful. And part of the need for this, it came from, I guess, identifying a challenge we've seen with spirituality, I've seen personally with spirituality in progressive Jewish spaces. And so we began this session today with the nigun, which really represents that part of Jewish culture that is solely there for spiritual purposes, solely there to elevate us, to lift us in song and prayer with no words. It actually was a Hasidic response to the rigid intellectualism of the Mitnagdim in the 18th century as a way to find joy amidst study and learning. And so in progressive Jewish spaces, I think we're really good at talking, and I think we're really good at thinking. But I think what we struggle a little bit more with is the feeling. I think we struggle really speaking about the divine, and not just speaking about the divine, but really bringing a connection to each and every one of us through the soul, however you conceive of that presence. Yet, this spiritual sense of Judaism is essential to our tradition. And I think part of the challenge in progressive Jewish spaces comes from 2 different places. Spaces that make us unique and special, but things that create challenges. The first being that disrupts the wrong word, but in between prayers, we explain, we use English, we contextualize, we really use our lexicon to understand and to connect, which on one hand I think helps us all really connect and interpret prayer in a way that's meaningful for us. But on another hand, it disrupts this warm-up, and I think prayer is something you actually have to build up, you have to get into, so when you're stopping and starting and stopping and starting, the body doesn't feel it as well. Again, the speaking is something and the contextualizing is something that makes us unique and special, but it's something to think about. The other is that, luckily, I think, we don't have obligations. We're not obliged to daven 3 times a day. So for most of us, I think we're out of practice. Maybe some of us go to shul every week, but I think the large majority of the progressive Jewish world is out of practice at feeling and really experiencing prayer from a spiritual point of view. And so again, it's a challenge that we're not doing this daily or weekly, maybe some of us are. And so what that means is our approach to spirituality has to be even more intentional. We have to think about it even more so we can really create something special, incorporating all of our uniqueness, all that what makes progressive Judaism special, while really focusing on what it means to pray and experience the divine. And part of the way we've tried to do that in Sydney is through this concept called singing communities, which Rabbi Mordechai will tell us a little more about.
Oops. Got it. Thanks, Avishai. Like Rabbi Zworenstein, I'm going to call him Rabbi because he's an Erev Rav, very soon to be Rabbi, as Zworenstein had mentioned earlier. Joey Weissenberg, a good mate of mine, actually coined the term singing communities, but actually the issue of participatory singing is not something that is new to us, and it's something indeed that preceded Joey's work. Although Joey Weissenberg has done a great deal of amazing work in the States in bringing the notion or bring the idea of participatory singing to the forefront and to the attentions of so many, many different congregations, especially in the States and in North America. So I met Joey at a USCJ conference in 2015. It was a conference of Masorti, rabbis and cantors, and we actually co-led a service together. And I learned so much from that experience with Joey, actually. Things that I have intuitively, instinctually known, also because of my own background. Just to give you a brief sense of my background, I was raised in an Iraqi Jewish synagogue, and we had a breakaway service because, like any Jewish community, we like breakaways. So we had a breakaway service on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and we were in this little amazing space. It was a kindergarten, actually. Now it's a block of a development. It's a block of units, but it was once a kindergarten on top of Old South Head Road in Sydney, and we would gather there, this breakaway community of about like 150 people, and we would sing together for Yamim Noraim, especially for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and we would bring the roof down together, bring the roof down. And now, of course, that required a certain amount of functional proficiency with prayer, which my family and the Sephardic community did have then. And so, as a young boy, I remember these experiences, and they made a huge impression on me. So from a very young age, coming into the cantorate later on, I kind of embodied a certain sense of what participatory singing, antiphonal singing, that is chants and response, was actually all about. And the idea of a chazan singing, and performing in a sense, was something that was kind of a little strange to me, coming from where my specific Eidah, my roots. But when I went to the States, I learned more about what was going on in progressive communities, and Joey and I started to team up to do work together. He was interested in my Sephardic roots and the music of the Mizrahi and Sephardic community, so I started to teach in his RSI retreats every year, the Rising Song Institute retreats from Machon Hadar and the Rising Song Institute, and we would teach around this model, this idea of participatory singing. And there are some really interesting things that Joey has said about it, that's articulated about how we encourage people to sing together, that I do want to share with you today, because I think they are important. Because like Avishai had said earlier, we have to be somewhat intentional about how we organize our communities in order to bring out participation. It's not something that is necessarily intuitive to progressive congregations. So essentially, the idea of concentric circles is something that Joey has worked with, but also the idea of manipulation of space. What do I mean by that? Anybody in the performing arts would probably understand what I'm saying. That you don't basically you don't put a small group of people in a big room. Because if you do that, you've totally lost the game from the beginning. I remember, for example, when I worked in Philadelphia, we used to have these, Malava Malkas, these kind of gatherings, Motzei Shabbat, once a month. And they became very popular. We had poetry and music and dance, and it was wonderful, wonderful energy. And we had about 230 people in a room that really fit 190, actually. And there were all sorts of people were angry, there was all sorts of kind of tension in the room. One lady would whack people with her stick, like get out of my way, all this kind of thing. But actually, the energy, the ruach in the room was fantastic. And this began to grow. And after a while, my congregants said, Cantor, why don't we move to the main sanctuary over there? And this main sanctuary was an old sort of, was an old church, and, pews and very, very long sort of room that could fit about 800 to 1,000 people. And I said, I promise you that if you do that, you're going to kill the vibe. You can absolutely kill the vibe. But I lost the argument. We went into the room and the vibe was killed. And so they said, all right, Cantor, we understand now. So we came back and we sort of braved the hot room and the sweat and the walking and the sticks and all kind of thing. But actually they got the message. They understood that manipulation of space is crucial, tantamount to a ruach experience in prayer, in tefillah. So that's a very important thing. So Joey talks about that in his book, this idea of how to configure space. He talks about concentric circles, but also not neat concentric circles, but the untidiness, in a sense, of prayer, the untidiness of a chair here, a chair there, whatever, but that we should be together in circles in a non-hierarchical kind of manifestation of prayer. Because if you think of circles, right, you don't have a prayer leader standing on a bema saying, now we turn to page this and page that, and please rise, please sit down, all of this. We're in a circle, we're in a non-hierarchical kind of geometric configuration, which is also, again, important for the experience for participatory prayer as well. So these were some of the things that we dealt with. Now, another thing, and I'll just say this before I hand it back to Avishai, and that is that there was kind of the conventional wisdom, I think, in the 80s and the 90s was that if you wanted to get people to sing along, right, you have a choir, and what you do is rather than the choir kind of standing up in front singing along with the cantor or the shatz, the shaliach tzibur, people who are part of the choir should go into the congregation and be sort of dispersed around the room. And so everybody that's kind of in sort of clusters around the room, if they're near somebody that knows the songs, that are singing, that has a good voice, that they can then join with them. But actually, Joey kind of imploded this wisdom, so it doesn't really work. Actually, what you really need is a small group of people tightly, intimately sort of bound together, singing, and that kind of energy will radiate out. And I found that to be actually true. So whether or not you're in a progressive congregation where you can afford to actually play with space a little bit more than a traditional setting, or if you're davening from the Amud or a bima and you're facing the Aron HaKodesh, if you're in that kind of situation, the thing to do would be to bring people closer together. And even around the bima, if you've got, say, like 20 or 30 people in a room, rather than have them sitting all over the place like that, bring them closer, actually make a little makela, a little mashorim sort of choir, if you like, around you of voices. And that way you're sort of building a deep intimacy in the sound that will then radiate outward. So I'll just leave you with that for now. We'll come back to some of these topics later if you have any questions.
So we've told you a little bit about how we've kind of taken this approach to prayer and made it something special in our community. And I see a lot of people, some people in this room who've been to a Kol Nefesh service, but for those who haven't, basically what we do is on the last Friday of every month we come, this is not the best photo of what we do, but situated in concentric circles, we sing, we have different members of the community give a Dvar Torah every week. We really have, I don't know how well you can see it here, but this like almost perfect balance of like every age group represented. It's really unique in that sense that we have such young people. We have Netzer Chanechim as young as our year threes, all the way up to the grandparents and everyone in between. But it hasn't been without its challenges. And it's taken a lot of effort and a lot of intentionality to really reach these points. And I think in a sec we'll discuss these challenges as a way of really exploring what we can do in our communities to bring people together, to evoke a greater connection to prayer and experience Judaism more fulfillingly, if that's a word.
Yeah, but I just want to say that the way that Avishai and I sort of birthed, not just Avishai and I, but Netzer and Emmanuel actually birthed Kol Nefesh was that, I teach a group known as the Circle, actually, and we study kind of mystical texts that are relevant to our contemporary society. That's a whole other thing. But within that group, there was a desire to have a davening experience that was slightly different from Masorti and Shabbat Live. They are both awesome, beautiful musical services. Or Shabbat Live isn't. Masorti's got a lot of ruach too. But the thing is that they, because we'd been studying certain texts, we wanted actually to spend time with, focusing on certain kinds of, if you like, mantra-like verses, psukim, that we were studying in the Circle. So we wanted to do this thing one Friday night a month. We decided that we would do that. And then, and Avishai and Gaia came along, actually, to one of those meetings, remember? And do you want to say what unfolded from there? Would you like to tell us?
Well, Gaia and I, we'd just come from our Shnat year, our year in Israel, and had many experiences with Nava Tehillah, which, for those who've been, is basically in the basement of Kol HaNeshama, a synagogue in Jerusalem, meet every month and have 300 people in circles singing. And it was something that when I went and I actually played with them for a bit while I was in Israel, I was like, we need this here. And so when I went into one of these circle gatherings, I was like, this is the people, this is who's going to do it. And so I reached out to Rabbi Mordechai and I said, let's do something together. And I guess from there, we experimented once. We didn't have a name. I think it started off, there weren't actually not many youth came to the first service. And as we met some more, we gave it a name. We had brainstormed a lot and slowly it built from there.
Absolutely. And, when I first came back from America, I'd spent 22 years in the States, and I'd worked at Emmanuel before as the sheni to the assistant cantor to Cantor Deutsch. But I went away for 22 years. When I came back, Rabbi Kamens really tasked me with one thing. He said, it's really important to engage the youth. And I said, how am I going to do that as a 55-year-old? How am I going to engage the youth? And of course, I had reached out to a lot of different people in Netzer, actually, in other places. But it does take the right kind of chemistry. And in Avishai, I found, first of all, an amazing human being, as those of you who know him will know, but also somebody that had a really deep sense of tefillah, deep sense of spirituality, and wanting to explore spirituality through the process of tefillah, really understanding deeply what it was all about, and Gaia too. But they came together, and so I just think it was just one of those moments of chemistry that worked, and I realized too that it's not necessarily about youth services or adult services or this kind of services or that kind of services. It's actually about the combination of bringing everybody together, because there's a lot of like-mindedness between somebody like Ben Sion, right, who's in his 70s and very deep and very spiritual, and our Avishai and Gaia over here too, and to see them dancing together and moving together and singing together is actually probably one of the most amazing things that have actually unfolded from Kol Nefesh. And it's a deeply embodied experience that has a demographic arc from the 70s all the way down to teens. And I just think that's been an amazing achievement for us. I'm most proud of that, actually.
But having that cooperation, it took a lot of effort. And we really, I think, for things like this have been tried before, and I think for the youth to want to be involved in these communities, we need a sense of ownership. We need a sense of being able to say, this is the service that we want, this is how we want to see us as leaders, and we want it. And it required on both sides, and we couldn't have an all-youth service. It wasn't getting the numbers when we tried it. And it involves us needing to give up a little bit of control, and it also really needed Rabbi Mordechai to give up a lot of bit of control. But through...
I was going to say something, but I'll hold off for a while.
But I think both Netzer and Emmanuel coming and being able to give up just a little bit, I don't think either of us had to give up too much. It tended up to work. We were able to really come and be in a space where each of us were comfortable. And what we created, rather than this model, which I find often happens in the Jewish community of leadership coming, youth, we want you to do this for us, and we want you to do that for us, and we want you to hand this to us, help us do this. It was more of a collaboration, and it wasn't something that Rabbi Mordechai built and invited us along to. It was something that from the start we worked together, we brainstormed together, we had partnerships together, and I think that's a really, really crucial part of what we did. And I know we had lots of discussions in Netzer about how we wanted it to move forwards, and I think that sense of collaboration in the truest sense is what allowed us to create such a rich intergenerational community.
Amazing, yeah. So what were some of our challenges then, hey?
Well,
Because there were some.
I think one of the major ones, apart from getting everyone comfortable, was really that balancing between professionalism and inclusion. And on one sense, I think some people want to come into a synagogue and see this really carefully constructed service, really smooth, fluent, professional musicians. We're not good at professional. It's difficult, but I think but also it was something we had to navigate, because some people really were like, hold on, these musicians, they don't know what they're doing, and because we invited everyone who wanted to come and play in the middle, and everyone who wanted to give a Devar Torah, say something, and we invited them to do it. How do we get through it?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. There were friends of mine who were amazing musicians that played with us, and they would even, after some experience, they said, look, if that happens again, I'm not coming back. If that happens again, I'm not going to do it. And so, it required a lot of masa and matan, required a lot of negotiations, about, what we're trying to do. And I think that what we understand, I think, is that at the essence of this, of course, the musical experience is important. Of course, ritual art is important, okay? I see rabbis and cantors and youth leaders as ritual artists, essentially. That's what we're all doing. And all of us together, when we participate, every single one of us, when we open our mouths to sing, to join together in prayer, we step into that space of being ritual artists, actually. But the thing is that, people were tied to their professionalism. I don't want to play if this guy's playing out of tune. I don't want to do it if this person's doesn't know how to, play 4 chords in 4/4 or 3/4. What are you going to do about that, Rabbi? I'm like, oh, well. So, these were some of the conversations that we had, and some people, respectfully just couldn't stay with us because of that. And it's a hard look, and I understand it. It's a hard balance. It's a hard balance because as a professional musician, it does grate on the ears. For example, if someone's playing out of key or whatever that is, or there's a learning curve, let's say, right? And so there was that sort of balance and that kind of problem. But if you put community, kehila as a shiviti, right, as a kind of, if you put that in front of you as something to aspire towards, as opposed to musical excellence, this is, then basically, you focus your attention and you focus your goals around what your shiviti is, what your intention is. And for us, the most important thing was community. We want a beautiful sound as well. We probably need to have more rehearsals. We need to work on that. There's no doubt about it. But it depends what you're putting forward as your focus.
And crucially, prayer is not a performance. I think it's something we see. Prayer is not a performance, and I don't know how to stress it enough. It's a community. It's coming together, and in fact, I think this lack of orchestration and this, not that it's not fluid, it runs very smoothly, but this sense of everyone having a space there makes people feel more included, and it makes people feel it gets rid of hierarchies, and it makes everyone want to sing and want to pray. Which also, I think, connects really well with the next challenge that I think we really had, which was, I think towards the beginning, we had a big, let's say, discussion.
Machloket l'shem shamayim, right? An argument for the sake of heaven.
On whether or not we should be using microphones, which was surprisingly created a lot of conflict. I know on the Netzer side of things, we were absolutely about the fact if we're not creating hierarchies, why should one person's voice be heard and another's not? And yet, on the other hand,
Just saying, for me, it was just more of a practical thing. Like if I'm singing Friday night, I got a bar mitzvah Saturday morning, I got another one Saturday afternoon, and sometimes I have that after that, I need to preserve my voice. And so if I'm, it's a lot of energy to build ruach in a room. It's a lot of energy to build spirit, And so I felt like if I always talk about sometimes a sound system giving me the comfortable edge, But we compromised. I backed down.
It's true. But I think we did end up getting rid of the microphones. The guitars were still mic'd up, but not the voices. But part of what it meant was that the voices of the kehillah, of the community, could be elevated, not one or two people leading it. Yet, this is something really difficult in our spaces because, in a sense, one sense, getting rid of the sound systems, it works when people are committed to singing, committing to singing together. And it works often in smaller congregations, in small rooms, in small spaces, where everyone can be heard and everyone's voice can be given equal value. Yet not having the sound system for the leaders often doesn't work when there's one leader singing and everyone else passively watching them. Also, that's seen in our synagogue sometimes. And so what I personally think part of the solution to that is actually prayer is participatory. Prayer is something everyone should engage in, and it's something we should all engage in equally. So what I think should be done is actually starting to simplify the prayers, doing them more repetitively. We'll go into some practical tips in a second. And cutting down almost this Nava Tehillah model, which takes out key lines from each of the prayers and really repeats them until everybody's singing along, and slowly lowering the volume of the microphone until the leader doesn't need to be microphoned because the community is so loud, because the community wants to be there.
And I think we've actually got to that place now, So, I mean, in Kol Nefesh, I think at least the repertoire that we've got, that we work with now, people know it really well. They know what to expect. And there isn't a need, actually, for anyone to use a microphone anymore. But this is important, this idea, especially in progressive contexts, of repetitions of certain psukim, of certain verses. Because, we can just get out a traditional prayer book and try to pray through it. But the truth of the matter is that most of us in progressive congregations are on a learning curve with that, right? So in a sense, like to take one verse, let's say, from each psalm of Kabbalat Shabbat leading up to Lecha Dodi and working with it and going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into it, right, can really, if we allow ourselves to open up to the possibility of that kind of experience, it can be really, really rewarding spiritually. I mean, I know that we're not used to it. Again, we're used to just singing something once or twice, like, when the notion of nigunim in my tradition doesn't exist. The Sephardim don't have nigunim, but once I went to the States and started working there, I became known as the la 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 cantor, because even though actually I never grew up with it, it just wasn't part of my experience at all. But I realized that, like most people have, it's a learning curve with Hebrew. It's a learning curve with the sort of art of davening, with the Hebrew of the davening, the sounds, all of it. The experience of making those sounds. So la 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 kind of helps us get to that place, and I believe that, the Hasidim, the early Hasidim probably understood this, and that's why they brought it in. They brought it into services as well. I mean, there were all sorts of other theosophical and spiritual reasons that I won't go into now, but like the idea, I mean, practically speaking, lema'aseh, right? Practically speaking, for us today, the idea of la 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 or the nigun helps us access the melody, helps us access prayer in a way that we probably wouldn't be able to if we were just sitting there and trying to daven like, reams and reams of Hebrew.
Brilliant. I'm weary of time, so should we go into some practical things that we've really done to
absolutely
make this happen?
Okay, great. So now one of the things that Joey teaches, which I think is really good, it's going to require you all to stand up. And actually what I need you to do is to all hug the wall. Move to the walls, everybody, okay? Just everyone go to one side of the wall, wherever you're closest to. And what we're going to do is we're going to sing that nigun that we opened up with before, right? Avishai and I will play it, and we're all going to sing it together. But I'm going to need you all to go to one side or the other side of the room. Don't hug the center. Okay, does everybody remember the nigun? Everyone remembers the melody? Okay, you ready? Okay, you can hug each other too. Prayer is about intimacy as well. as well. Okay, good. So let's try it. Let me be all.
You might want to put your mask on if you feel comfortable.
Come closer, everybody. Real close now. We're going to get real close. Now we're going to be real everyone closer, closer, closer. This time you've got to get as close as we can. If you're not comfortable, I understand. We're trying to keep it closer.
Come if you can, spread it here a little bit. You really want to be close.
You've got to get close, otherwise this won't work, okay? All right, now, everyone, we're going to do it again this time, okay? Okay, we're going to do it again. You ready? 1, 2, 3, and...
space to our advantage, but we use other things. We use repetition. We repeat it, and we keep going, and if we had a chance, we would go and go and go and go. And we use this arc of the prayer of knowing, of starting and building up and getting louder and faster and faster and faster, and then being able to come out of it at the end. Depending on the melody you choose, you you're going to want to do it in different ways. You might go straight into it or end on a note, but being really intentional about the way, the speed, the pace, the repetition, and being able to feel the room and know where to go with that. And the crucial thing which we'll explore right now is actually at the end, giving a time for silence, giving time not just